Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
Good. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. Yeah, it was really good. Enjoyed having the kids in town and, lots of, fun and food and family and football. And, most of football was, a little disappointing, being a Jets fan, but we're not even going to talk about it.
Yeah, no, we'll get away from it. So what I wanted to talk about this week was, I've been following to some degree the OpenAI situation, where the board basically fires the founder CEO. Then he's going to go to Microsoft, but then he doesn't go to Microsoft, and then the board gets replaced, and he comes back, and it's been a freaking soap opera. And I won't pretend to understand it all because I don't, and I suspect there'll be Harvard Business School studies and books and documentaries written about this thing. But what it made me think about was the sort of unique relationship that founders, who are by definition innovators, their role in companies as the companies get bigger and if they're acquired or however it happens to play out. And I thought this would be a great conversation to have with you because you have founded 4 companies, right? If I'm right, sold 3. You've had boards, you've done all that. So yeah. I kind of wanted to, ask you, to the degree that you've been following their situation, how typical it seems in terms of the total disconnect between the board and the CEO, and the board seemed to have totally misplayed it. But I would imagine that as a founder CEO, to start with, you've got to walk the line about having a board that's supportive of you, but also one that's willing to be honest with you going forward.
Yeah, it's such an involved subject, multifaceted subject. I think it's been fun to watch the OpenAI saga unfolds, and I think to your point, there's a lot we haven't. There's a lot that we still need to learn from that. I think there was some discussion on a disagreement, and was he going to go start something else? Did OpenAI have a big breakthrough? What was happening there, and was this board that is the board of a nonprofit that is overseeing the risks and for the greater good of AI and all that, and where did they get misaligned, and how did that all happen, and then how did it all resolve? That is going to be, yes, amazing case study. I would say from my experience, both as a founder and also investing in companies and being on boards, with that have had CEO founders, it's the vision and passion that it takes to be a founder is really hard to describe until you've been through it. It's not easy to have an idea, right? It's not easy to kind of identify a market for that idea, build a company, at least the beginnings of a company, to bring that idea to market, right? All that is hard. Where it really gets hard is what you have to endure as a founder to make that be successful. You've heard, you've seen posts. Elon Musk had a great post a couple weeks ago about it. It's like you literally are said no to 99 times for the one time you're said yes to, right? Whether that's, particularly just bringing your product to market, whether it's trying to build partnerships, trying to sell, it's just the world is against you as a founder. And so you need to build up, you need to have a lot of resilience. And frankly, you need to have a fair amount of ego, right, to be able to withstand that.
By the way, and you don't often these days hear the words Elon Musk and great post in the same sentence.
Well, fair. There was.
Really, that must have been the one.
Well, this wasn't even this was more like a clip of him talking about it being hard. And then the other thing he talked about in that clip too is, as a founder and as a CEO, most of what you deal with is crap, is hard stuff. It's either, employee issues, product issues, market issues, sales issues, just you're spending all day just dealing with the hard stuff. So, but again, to get a company to the heights of where you've attracted funding, where you're maybe multiple rounds of funding, where you're growing the top line, where the market has developed, you need to have a fair amount of ego to be able to do that. It's that ego that gets tested when you reach there's different phases of the company where maybe it's time to consider a CEO swap. Always very hard to do. And I think that when you think about like when is a company kind of ready to consider that CEO change or that founder change? Some of it could simply be the company's growing, fast, it's getting big, it's becoming a complex organization that maybe the founder doesn't have experience or doesn't have capability to run, right? And so it's become bigger than that founder can handle, and the organization becomes less effective. That's a certain type of conversation than you have with the founder. You may try to bring in a COO or a president at some point to handle some of that, and that can work for a while, but often the CEO's presence kind of overwhelms that person, and that becomes tough. A second kind of use case for replacing a founder is, maybe the organization needs to kind of diversify its revenue lines, right? Like you've built this company around this great idea that the founder had, and that's really, done a good job at helping the company grow. But now its ultimate kind of growth through the next levels, it's hard to keep riding that initial, product idea through. And, the founder can be so focused and so, have such great aptitude around the product that they've created that the founder isn't necessarily, able to kind of see the either product extensions or other product lines, that can be built. And then, also, it could just be that the founder's running out of steam and is afraid to admit it. They're running out of that fire in the belly, is not as inspirational and positive as they've been, and they just become, kind of worn out, and they're afraid to admit that. And there's a lot of reasons that, that it's time it's time for the founder to step aside. Some founders are able to, have the ego and the perspective such that they say, it is the right time for me to step aside, either take on the chairman role or, do a product role in the company or something, or maybe go off and do something else and just maybe keep a seat on the board. But there's lots of times that the board has to help the founder see that. And there's certain times that the founders just aren't willing to give up on that. And it's tough because and whenever you make that switch too, you're taking a risk, right? You're taking a risk that you're going to pull a big piece of the company's DNA out. So that's kind of a long answer to you, but it's such a multifaceted, issue that, it's something that, is always on the startup and early stage investors' minds. I think any of us that invest in companies at that stage really want to see the founder succeed. It's better the longer the founder is able to keep growing with the company. That's often better. But it's pretty rare, for a founder to be able to take a company, all the way through to, massive valuations and IPO or acquisition or the like.
Well, and listen, we're not just talking about we started talking about technology companies, but this, I would imagine, is true if you're a retailer. You start with one store, then you have two, then you have five. At what point do you bring somebody in to run it? Because there's such different. I mean, it seems to me, as somebody, I guess I'm technically a founder, but I'm a little mom and pop shop and never had any desire to be larger than that. The skill set that it's required to start something is different than the skill set necessary to build something, which is different than the skill set to run something
or to scale something. Yeah,
scale something up.
yeah,
And but I would imagine that one of the hardest things is to make sure that in that continuum, even as you're making changes or helping a founder become an effective CEO, is to maintain the ability to continue to innovate.
absolutely.
Right? Because that person who may be really, really good at running the company may not be an innovator in the same sense. I would imagine.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, if you found, you know, whether it's a tech company, whether it's a retailer, whether it's a brand and, you know, product, you initially capture that lightning in a bottle that is that magical connection between your offering and your customer, right? And you know, when you've hit that, it's magic. You know, you've got this great fit. You've got this, you know, this thing you can totally see scaling. Um, and you know, if it's a retailer and it's, you know, I've captured it in the essence of the first store that I've built, and I'm able to replicate it once or twice or 3 times more, you know, that's a lot different than trying to replicate it 40, 50, 60 times more. And that does take a different personality type to come in and operationalize that, but also have an appreciation for the magic and that lightning in a bottle that does exist, right? You definitely want to keep that. But then also, to your other point, to be able to continue to innovate, you know, you do need to build the culture that encourages that, right? That can almost operationalize innovation, and that, you know, we're going to, you know, wire the organization, structure the organization such that we're encouraged to take risks, we're encouraged to innovate on behalf of our customers, you know, test, learn, either kill or scale. Whether that's a retailer, a product, or a technology company, you know, that's a key element to that scaling that is tough. And I do think there's, you know, few leaders that are good at all of that. But I think the best leaders don't have to be good at all of that, right? You just have to recognize and be able to incorporate all of that in the, you know, formula that is their culture and is their team.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. You think about certain kinds of leaders. I mean, Howard Schultz, I guess, not technically a founder, but is in essence founded the company that we think of as being Starbucks. I mean, there's Jeff Bezos, but even outside the technology area, there you've got companies like Phil Knight at Nike. The ability, the idea that he started that company and has been run it for so long is sort of extraordinary. I mean, he's almost the exception that proves the rule, in the sense that most people can't do it.
Yeah, few people can do it. I mean, you know, I think it's interesting in our industry. You know, you look at the most successful, particularly like, you know, large regional retailers in the grocery business. Often those are, you know, family founded companies,
Right.
still run by the family.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, they've been able to kind of build that and foster that over, you know, oftentimes 2-3 generations, which is pretty amazing. I don't think there are many other industries where you see that, you know, that kind of succession happen, you know, from founders, that works.
Yeah. I mean, an example of a company that seems to have done it well, although I'm not sure it's not founders, but it's certainly people who have been there a long time, is when you look at companies like Bristol Farms and Metropolitan Market. I mean, there have been changes in those companies, but Good Food Holdings seems to me has done an exceptional job of building on the strengths where they work together, but also allowing them to be very separate and do their own thing, which is different than companies like, say, Dorothy Lane or Stu Leonard's, where they've pretty much
Had their own thing. Yeah.
they've made their own way. But an example of it where it didn't seem to work was when Fairway in New York was acquired, right? And then the founding family left.
Yeah.
And they lost so much of that energy, that innovation impulse.
Yeah, and I think you see that, and you know, that is a risk in any of these occasions where a larger company acquires the smaller innovative company.
Yeah.
And then it's, it's can you build the environment that enables that founder, that founding family or founding team, to stick around and maintain that. And that's a whole other conversation and set of case studies too, because you see it working well sometimes, but very often, you ultimately see it not working well, because ultimately you become part of a bigger company, and then things like, your P&L and efficiency and, EBITDA and return on investment, all that start to matter. And, that can kind of wear down the company that maybe used to be private and could make investment decisions with a little bit of a longer view. That in some of these bigger companies, they just don't have as much luxury to do it, because they have to meet quarterly results.
One other quick question, if I can. One of the things that I found myself wondering about was, so you've got OpenAI, which has taken an enormous investment from Microsoft, which makes total sense. It's not hard to imagine that at some point Microsoft could buy it, take operational control of it. The thing that really surprised me is that Microsoft didn't have a board seat. That's going to change, I would imagine, considering how many billions of dollars they were putting into the company. But it's interesting to me, for example, and we'll just use them as an example, is I'm not at least aware of any like retailers. I think we can all agree that AI is going to play an enormous role in how the retailing is going to change over the next 10 years. Fair, right? I wonder how many retailers are out there placing an economic bet on that. And in other words, shouldn't retailers be thinking about investing in companies? Like, I don't mean investing like in their stock, but figuring out a way to invest in them, maybe not to the degree that Microsoft is, but to have a seat at the table in some way, shape, or form, so they actually have first mover advantage when it comes to employing this kind of stuff in their businesses. Is that, or am I speaking like a civilian who doesn't know what he's talking about?
No, I think I agree with that. I think that there's a massive opportunity for, individual companies in the industry, organizing bodies, or very interested parties to be more active in the fostering of key innovations that will move the industry forward. I think that there's a few retailers that are really good about pushing forward, their objectives, for their customers and where they want to take their customers over time. And I think that those best of breed retailers are taking and using the best of existing available products, right? So I'm taking best practices in commerce, digital marketing, retail media, labor scheduling, whatever, supply chain, whatever the technology or the process is, and you're weaving together kind of what is best of breed. I don't see the industry taking any kind of lead in determining what is next. And I think that if there are companies in the industry that are ready to do that, let me know. If there's companies in the industry that are ready to do that, I think that they do stand to make a big step change, to forward their own agendas and to ultimately, help the industry overall while getting a first mover advantage. Having a seat at the table is huge. But I think it's just hard for companies to think that way, because it doesn't drive their current P&L. It doesn't solve a current need, right? There's not a hole in my product roadmap or a hole in my customer offering, today that will fill. But when you think about what your customer offering should look like 1, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, you really do want to be at those tables.
It reminds me of now the late lamented Retail Tomorrow days, right? When Retail Tomorrow would run conferences and I remember going to Boston. We didn't look at we did look at some stores in Boston, but mostly we went to MIT. We started talking to technology startups to just figure out where the world was going. it didn't take the next step in terms of saying, okay, how could we maybe they should have taken the approach of, okay, how can we going to start to organize a Retail Tomorrow fund that can invest in some of these technologies and give the people who are involved, a way to get first mover access to some of them and become laboratories, because a lot of these technologies are looking for retail laboratories where they can play. They can be part.
They are, and the problem is that's all skewed by the commercial intent,
right?
The necessary commercial intent of the early stage company,
right?
And the bias, conservatism, skepticism of the retailer, and the existing roadmap of the retailer that is designed to meet customer needs based on things we know are available today or should be available to us today. And yeah, that's a next level discussion that I think is a very clear and present opportunity, for the industry to, to consider.
And if your name is not Walmart,
mm-hmm.
Amazon, and for the sake of argument, Kroger/Albertsons, then you really ought to be doing it, because those three companies, those entities are, to varying degrees, trying to get first mover advantage. And so if you're not one of them, you almost certainly have to be looking for, you want to be out meeting founders, right? Getting tours of their facilities, sitting down with their people and figuring out what's the opportunity here. And yeah, it may run counter to how you've always done things, but I think one of the things we've always talked about here on the innovation conversation is how important it is not to do things the way you've always done things.
100%. And frankly, the resources it would take any individual retailer to participate in something like that are not that significant. It just really isn't that significant relative to the benefit they could gain from doing so.
A good place to end. So listen,
yes.
Thank you, as always. I will see you in a couple of weeks, and take care. Thanks, everybody.
Look forward to it. Thanks, everyone.